Welcome to Healthcare Algorhythm. I'm Dr. Will Strimel. If you want the real story behind today's healthcare challenges and the strategies and technologies people are actually using to solve them, you're in the right place. Short conversations, clear insights, practical takeaways. Let's get into it.
And welcome back to Healthcare Algorhythm, the podcast where we explore care delivery, operations, and technology as they're evolving in real time. Now, if you are a founder or a software engineer that's working in the healthcare startup space right now, I think you're going to find today's discussion very interesting, because one of the things that I've learned, both as a practicing clinician as well as a healthcare entrepreneur, is that healthcare is not short at all on innovation. What it's short on is innovation that actually fits in with the way that care is delivered every day. And today's guest is working right at that point of attack. Paulo Machado is a fractional co-founder and has been one since 2008, a healthcare entrepreneur, advisor, mentor, and impact investor. He works closely with founders and teams trying to build and scale companies in one of the most complex industries that's out there. And he sees firsthand why some companies take off and many never leave the ground. And I wanted to have Paolo on because he's not just really thinking about technology. He's thinking about adoption, trust, and execution. Paolo, welcome to the show.
Hey, William, thanks very much for having me. Looking forward to our discussion today.
Fantastic. So, yeah, before we get started and what you see in the startup landscape, I wanted to kind of take a step back, because many people start out very early in their careers with healthcare as a passion, but other people are sort of sucked into it or drawn into it. So just wanted to get a little bit of your origin story, what landed you in healthcare, and kind of how that got you to where you are today.
Yeah, I actually started off as a coder and a data scientist. So I started coding about 50 years ago and took those skills into the finance world for a decade. It was really interesting using all these emerging technologies to figure out how to trade better and make more money for people better, but it really wasn't aligned with my values.
Mm-hmm.
At the age of 30, I decided to essentially move into healthcare. My first foray was in a large pharmaceutical company, Bristol Myers Squibb. Spent a decade there. Came in on the corporate development side, but I have professional ADD, so I jumped around quite a bit. Worked across pretty much every disease state in that organization, as well as multiple countries, multiple what I'll call functional areas. So corporate development, strategy, pricing, analytics, sales, marketing. Ran a couple of business units there. So I had a blast, including launching senior care. I always thought of it as sculpting fog. Like whenever there's something new to try out, I would be interested in bringing something to bear that was scalable. Because the reality is that technology is an enabler. It's the piece you need for the journey. It's not going to get you all the way there. So you have to really think much more broadly. But love doing that for a decade there. And then from there, I was at AstraZeneca for a couple of years and did 2 years in the first pharmaceutical global innovation center. This was in 2006. So yeah, about 20 years ago now. It was early days in the healthcare innovation space. Was a blast. There's so many people trying to, there's this thing called the internet and this thing called mobile that were just coming out. People were trying to figure out how to integrate those technologies into healthcare delivery. So it's fascinating to kind of play around with things like digital therapeutics and care at home and all the things now that are much more common and people are attempting to scale much more aggressively. And then eventually I went off, man, and really had a blast since 2008, helping early stage organizations. So that's the professional side, just really focusing in on innovation and helping where innovation happens. So I've spent time with large companies figuring out how to innovate, but they move a little bit slower than the pace I would like. And you also tend to have a little bit less impact in terms of what's being done in a large organization because they're larger. A lot of decision by large groups takes quite a bit of time and energy. So working with startups really much more aligned with my personality, working directly with the executive teams. If they like something, we can implement it right away. So it's a lot of fun moving into this space.
And at that point when you went out on your own, was there something specifically with healthcare as an industry? Because even by that point, you had a ton of experience, very diverse background. Was there something that was like a personal connection, or did you feel that that's where most of the problems that needed to be solved were? Because healthcare, of course, is the most regulated industry out there, so it's also can be daunting.
Yeah, for sure. But I came from finance. kind of was on par in
Sure.
terms of regulations for
For
sure.
sure.
I've never been in an unregulated industry, so I don't even know what that would be like. But I've been in working for 40 years now, right? So essentially, all of it has been two heavily regulated industries. The personal side, yeah, I've got a tremendous amount of. I come from a very unhealthy family. Let's put it that way. A whole range of diseases and early deaths from cancers and heart disease and diabetes, mental illness. It's pretty much affected my family throughout my entire life. And as an immigrant, I learned early on how to navigate the system from a patient perspective on behalf of my family, since I was the first person to speak English in my family in this country and come from a long line of people who had not had any formal education. So I was the oldest born in my generation. So that kind of gave me the opportunity to talk to doctors like yourself when I was like a preteen, trying to figure out and translate and try to learn how things work. So was very involved in all of it, and just helping my family and then eventually friends navigate the healthcare system.
And as you look at, well, even if you think back to then, you're looking at potential business opportunities, solutions. Do you find that is your first instinct to see it as from the patient's perspective versus the problem solver perspective? I mean, there's always going to
Um,
be a little bit of a blend of the two, but I want to, is there one that you
yeah,
more identify with, and did that
for
push
sure.
you in a certain direction?
It's a great question. I think at the end of the day, care delivery, the workflow side of it, as well as the life flow side, are inextricably interwoven. Well, from my perspective, the best thing you can do is to avoid care delivery by being as healthy as you possibly can. And we know the
Sure.
vast majority of chronic disease is all about the decisions we make. Yes, your genetics plays a big role in that, of course, but the reality is the vast majority of your well being, mental and physical, is about what you can do for yourself. And of course, the care delivery system as it is now, being fee for service, doesn't always support well being. It supports keeping you alive when the shit hits the fan, right? End of the day. And we've been trying to do pockets of shifts for decades now that I've been involved in, moving towards more of a value-based care system. It's going very slowly because it is a for-profit industry, and moving a $5 trillion industry from pay me lots of money for time spent and procedures versus actually keeping me well is just not aligned with the fact that this is largely a heavy for-profit industry with huge price inequities.
I mean, and that goes back to the 1980s when HMOs first even started to come around, and it's just so impossible. I personally, I think a lot of the problem is because everyone loves the idea of saving money. No one loves the idea of accepting the risk. And I think that's really where the trouble is right now in terms of who's really willing to take both the risk and the benefit of trying to bend the cost curve.
And then
Um,
the other part
yeah,
too,
go ahead.
like at the end of the day, it's a $5 trillion industry. Even if you apply all the AI in the world and use all these technologies to replace people, those are jobs that are going to be lost. And I
Sure.
don't, the healthcare industry is going to go down without a lobbying and policy fight to just lose 20-30% of the employees that they have sitting around. There's going to be a lot pushback, right? Just because of the nature of what we're doing. So it's going to be very interesting because, that $5 trillion is somebody's P&L, right?
Yeah, for sure. And like that's a great segue because a lot of people who are founders now or who are coming into this market see that $5 trillion and they know all about the inefficiencies. They see all the money in the world that can be saved. And in a service business like healthcare, a lot of that is around people. So, I want to get into your kind of experiences around what people are doing and what you're seeing. But let's even just start with this concept that we mentioned earlier about a fractional co-founder, because I think for too many people that's novel. I mean, I think one of the hardest things about getting your idea to the next stage is finding a team to help you, and often that is a co-founder, and that can be a long term marriage. So tell me about what's a fractional co-founder.
Yeah, I mean, what I saw in the market when I started doing the consulting is it what most founders had very specific and focused skill sets. If you come in as a clinician, obviously you've got all the clinical skills, and there are gaps in other places. If you're a product person, if you're a tech person, if you're a commercial person, it doesn't really matter. Most people have one thing that they really spent time on. Um, for better or worse, I spent a bit of time across a lot of different things. I will never be a clinician or a lawyer, but I spend time in a bunch of other segments. So what I found is I would typically partner up with people who are early stage who are missing some gap. And rather than hire someone full time, they would bring me on board to help out and supplement the team until it's time for them to raise enough money to get whatever I was doing for them full time. But in the early days, not many small organizations, small startups can really afford a full time chief anything officer.
For sure.
So, having somebody come in and spend anywhere from, I've had stints as short as 3 months, but I've had them also go for 5 years. So it just completely is varied. And some of them, actually, three of them turned into full time roles. One is CEO, and the other two is leading commercial effort. So it just really is varied, and I'm flexible, and I'm what I think of as founder friendly, but also very real, right? And not try. I do my best to be incredibly authentic about what I really see, and that's mostly around the people stuff. And then, of course, that bleeds into the product. So is this the right team that I want to work with? Are our values aligned enough for us to work together? And are we going to have fun doing it? Because if I'm going to do this for a number of years with somebody, just like taking a job, you should hopefully like the people you're going to be working with, right? For me, I don't view it any differently. If I'm going to work with somebody for a few months or potentially a few years, I want to make sure we're aligned as possible up front. It's kind of almost like a dating game initial discussion where I lay out my thoughts around, like, why am I in healthcare? I ask them why they're in healthcare, and make sure that where our values are aligned and our longer term mission visions are aligned around why we're here. And yes, I do pass on quite a few organizations who want to work together because
Yeah, I was going to ask that very question. So, is there a consistent theme with those and the ones you pass on?
uh, healthcare is just another industry where they're looking to fix a problem, and it's all about the technology and it's not about the people. You were asking about patient centered. Yeah, it's all about the patient. I mean, healthcare industry wouldn't exist if it wasn't for patients, right?
For
It's
sure.
not doctors just hanging around looking at each other, and they have to have patients. So yes, it has to be around solving real health issues. But of course, there's just a boatload of ancillary issues surrounding the health issues that have to be addressed too. So, to your point, you mentioned earlier, care delivery. Like, how do you do care delivery? Like, we have to make that efficient as possible. But ultimately, there's a reason that that's happening. You're trying to improve the health and well being of a person or preventing them from getting sick in the first place.
So I noticed the words focus and purpose when I hear you talk about the work that you do. So maybe just start off. What do those words mean to you personally? What's your definition of those?
I mean, my everybody has to find their own purpose. But for me, it's to have a positive impact on people's lives. I do my best to do that from a day to day basis with just individuals I'll meet on the street, all the way to the professional side of what I do. And in terms of focus, it's really around focusing on the people that I'm working with. I don't focus as much on the thing that we're trying to solve for because there are so many problems. Healthcare, lucky for me, there's so many problems in healthcare that need to be addressed. If this was a finely tuned machine, I would not have work, right? But as we all know, our $5 trillion healthcare delivery system has to go a long way before we optimize health and well-being at a reasonable cost. And by the way, also make sure that our providers are not, fodder that gets crushed by the system to deliver that care. So there's a tremendous number of angles around all of this. And of course, none of this is really being delivered very, very equitably. Because even if you have money and knowledge and you're wise enough to know things in life, you won't know how to maneuver through a healthcare system. I can't tell you how many doctors and or nurses I will help just navigate the health system.
Absolutely,
Even
yeah.
even people in the
When I
machine.
step outside of my lane, I'm just a patient and not a good one. So on that focus and purpose theme, what does that look like if you're evaluating a team, right? How do you see that? What do they do tangibly that shows you, yes, this is a team that's focused. Yes, this is a team that has.
Um, yeah, the focus part I don't spend as much time on. It's more around, is their mission aligned with the things that I care about solving for? There could be things they're trying to support that don't excite me, and I'm not going to be able to, one or the other. Either they don't excite me or I can't add value. It could be something that's just too esoteric and I have absolutely no value to add at the stage of the company. So, for instance, a very early stage drug discovery company where it's just a bunch of very smart people trying to figure out how an enzyme works,
Mhm.
I'm not going to add any value 5 years before it becomes commercial, right? That's a purely scientific endeavor. Um, Values is very easy to address from my perspective because I'm very direct and authentic about those conversations. First conversation I have with with a person who's leading the company, the founder, it's all around just what's their purpose and what are their values? Like, what are they trying to solve for? How do they engage with the world? Do they appreciate vulnerability and authenticity in conversations? I find that often ego gets in the way of founders. They may have solved the problem before, or they have the hubris of never having solved the problem, but see, oh, this is just a simple problem. We can just fix that. In healthcare, there are very few things that are actually simple.
Amen. Amen to that. So then going with that, what is it that excites you? You said has to excite you, or the word I think about is engagement. People, if you're engaged, if it's something that's engaging you, even if it's hard, you're going to stick with it. So, what excites you right now in 2026?
So beyond the people part of it, let's
Mhm.
assume that there's a
Yeah,
team
sure.
I'm excited about than the things. The actual things that are really intriguing to me, in particular around like human well-being and flourishing. So mental health and well-being are really important. There's companies I'm working with in that space. There's some um, cardiovascular companies. There's some brain health companies, more like the physical brain health versus the mental health and well-being side of things. So yeah, it's been an interesting range of companies that I'm working with right now. Um, and some of them are what I'll call systemic issues, like how to provide care operationally and cost effectively. So it could be some of that too. That's interesting. But to me, it's really mostly about the disease states. Cancer in particular is one that's very challenging still
Sure.
after decades of working on it. And I think what's also interesting is all of these kind of core chronic diseases that I've mentioned, like cardiovascular or other neurological, there's always some type of emotional stress that comes from these diseases. If you think about the average patient or human being, just living life and or having a disease on top of just living life adds a tremendous amount of emotional stress and distress and anxiety and depression and all the other things that come along with that, which we largely ignore, right? If you think about it, if you're going to a cardiologist to deal with a heart condition, you're dealing with whatever the heart condition is. You're not going to say, wow, you look really stressed about that. And you're not going to sit down and talk to them about it. That's not your lane, right? You're going to say, hey, maybe you
Sure.
should see a therapist or whatever, but you're not going to
Nor
follow.
yeah, nor is there time in the day, right? Or
No,
at least
of
I think
course.
that's
No,
people's
no. It's just
perspectives.
the
We just don't
system's
have
not
the
aligned,
bandwidth.
right? We don't have a holistic view, and there is some
Correct.
interesting movement towards more functional medicine, more broader approaches, but that's still a microcosm. Most of it's not covered very effectively by insurance, so it's just for a smaller subset of people. But yeah, I think the how do we help people thrive and flourish even when they're dealing with chronic conditions in highly stressful situations. So that's been really intriguing to me. And by the way, and you mentioned earlier about scaling, and how do you scale that? Not just how do you do it, but how do you scale it, right? How do you scale compassion and emotional support? Just as a company I bumped into a little while ago that I've been working with, it's tackling that very problem. So that's incredibly exciting to see if we
Yeah,
can actually get there.
that's a great thought, right? How do you scale compassion? And in an environment where everyone's really stressed, include
Oh,
the
yeah,
not only the patients, right? The providers,
for sure. No, absolutely. It's a great point. I mean, as everyone's a patient, right?
right.
Of living, right? Condition is called life. Most people are not handling it well, and it's just a matter of degree, right? Some people are a total train wreck and they end up CEU, and other people are kind of just outside of CEU, and there's some that are much earlier on and handling it well. But you kind of look at the distribution of that, right? There's not as many people who are in great shape, so to speak,
Sure.
mentally, physically, and emotionally. There's quite a few people that are hit the wall and are in the care system and then have polychronic conditions, right?
Yeah,
Then
and
you have some.
interestingly, as our technology improves, it seems as though we're getting farther and farther. There's a segment of the population that's really benefiting from it, but I think the most people are becoming we're living longer, so that's a part of it, but we're doing so in a way that's a lot less healthier. And
For
you would
sure.
think there's so much opportunity from not just the care, not just curing disease or treating disease, but just the day to day inefficiencies of healthcare. There's so much opportunity for innovation to make a difference. And yet this system is incredibly hard to change. And so, that's one of the reasons I'm here to try to put these puzzle pieces together. But I'm curious from your perspective, when you think of innovation as a process, as you've seen early stage go through is it different in healthcare, or is it that people just don't understand that, hey, you can't approach innovating, in healthcare like you would in many other industries, and it's just very unique? Or why is it? Why is it so hard to break through and make real change?
Yeah, I mean, my hypothesis has been the same for a very long time. And I haven't seen a better one yet, which is really that we have a complex system because the patient, the provider of care, and the payers of care are rarely the same, right? Small percentage of the time when there's a perfect overlap, and their objectives, short-term and long-term objectives, and financial incentives are completely misaligned and
Absolutely.
pulling in opposite directions quite often, right? And that creates much of the problem that we have in healthcare, right? End of the day. Um, so when you talk about innovation, there's all types, right? Most people think of innovation as technology. I think technology is just an enabler, right? The real innovation has to be around what kind of compassion do we need to bring? Like, what are we just solving for? Is it truly human flourishing, or is it to improve quarterly earnings for-profit companies or to
Correct.
grow profit companies? Because nonprofits and healthcare are basically completely like for-profits, but they just have a much lower tax bill. So
Right.
I think
Exactly.
end of I mean, end of the day, they behave the same. There's this whole massive financial temporal misalignment that's been going on forever, right? Like just even the whole issue of, for instance, he who pays your bills today, but they don't care if you get sick later when you're not on their P&L, right?
Right.
And
Well, and that's a great point. And that's a big reason that you'll see why a lot of this preventive wellness care doesn't work, or why it's hard to get sustained investment in it, because you might live in Seattle, and I don't know the payers mix out in Seattle, but let's whoever the IBC is that pay out there, right? You could live there for 10 years. They could invest all this in your wellness, and then you move.
yeah,
Right? And
plan
then
whatever.
yeah, and so then it's like, they really get to benefit for this? Is one of the things that's very much challenges, is who's making the investment and who's seeing the return on the investment,
I
and
would even
how do
go.
we align that?
I would go one further than that, even because that's just within healthcare. It's messed up. But I would posit, and it's pretty obvious that most industries know how weak human beings are around their addictions, whether it's gambling, smoking, eating, you know, digital, all these addictions we have as human beings. They know how our brains are wired, how we eat, right? And it's very obvious that healthcare is really fighting every other industry. It's big health versus all others that are trying to take advantage of the human condition. And at the end of the day, just going off and giving you solutions that aren't really helping you flourish, right? Like being a conspicuous consumer of everything, whether it's a physical good or your attention economy that exists now. That's not really good for human thrive or flourishing. The data is in, the flourishing has not happened because of all this technology and software we brought into the world. Um,
Right.
so
Because we still
how do we
it hasn't created aligned incentives, basically.
no, oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Like when the best example we have recent is smoking industry, right? They lied. They came out with studies. They countered what we all kind of knew. Docs were part of it. They were smoking while they're seeing patients. I mean, it was a whole systemic thing, right? And the day a cardiologist smoking a cigarette while he's seeing somebody who's having
Right.
put in, right? I mean, like insanity today. But that was known. Eventually, there was a massive lawsuit. Like, but there was 20, 30 years of damage done, and with a massive payout. The reality is you have to do that in advance. Like, what are we actually solving for? What is healthcare supposed to deliver? And it has to be aligned across all the industries that affect human beings. Like the attention economy is a good example. Social media is not helping human beings thrive in the world, right?
Of course not. No. Especially young human beings.
Okay, so let's good example. Are we going to have a massive tobacco style lawsuit for all social media companies or anyone who's driving attentions and ads? Is the advertising industry and everyone else going to pay it back? Is the food industry going to pay for the Ozempic bills because they drove everybody to have to take them? Like, why is this okay that we have all these exogenous external um, variables that are happening in the world and the people who are causing them? have absolutely no responsibility for them. It's like the whole pollution thing. Like, who pollutes doesn't have to clean up very much. Healthcare is not that different.
Now, do you find as you're engaging again back to the startup founders, and of course, as a clinician, I might be a little bit biased with this question, but do you find that since most developers are going to come from, a software as a service background, SaaS background, and that the way they're thinking of bringing a product to market and scaling it might not work in healthcare, whereas, clinicians don't have that experience. They're thinking more about solving the problem in the context of the patient, and they don't think about scaling, right? They think if it works for one person, it'll work for everyone. So, are you finding that the people who are building the solutions don't really have a good understanding of how to scale things?
A great question, because it's changed for sure, right? When I was early days doing this back in 2008, and even before that, when I was at AZ in 2006, it was mostly tech people coming in with ideas, right, on the tech side of things. But in the last handful of years, it's been a lot more entrepreneurs getting involved. They're getting burnout in their day job, so they want to do something fun. So that they'll tag on as a fractional chief medical officer for companies and get involved. So I'm seeing a lot more docs and nurses and other healthcare professionals just really get involved earlier on. That being said, it's still majority of people are tech people, right? And I would probably, I don't know if the numbers are correct, but my gut tells me that there's more people inside the industry now who are continuing in the industry to solve problems, like experts in it. Like you said, it's very complicated. So you'll see like insurance executives, you'll see pharma executives, you'll see all kinds of executives from the industry go off and spin off a startup. It's much less common. I think a lot of people got burned. They came in from like some random tech industry that knew nothing about healthcare. So look, oh,
Mhm.
that looks so easy. We should still do that.
Exactly.
And there has been some success there, but it feels like it's a smaller percentage over time, because the stories get out, right? That these guys get burned pretty bad. And by the way, if I'm an investor, I look at someone who has absolutely no experience in healthcare. If they're trying to address a clinical problem, it's just going to be a tougher sell to a typical investor. They're going to want to see the clinical chops. If it's really just moving money around or scheduling or something that has nothing to do with healthcare, you can do it in any industry. I think that's those type of tech entrepreneurs can come in and fix the what I'll call non-clinical issues. But if it's clinical, most people, myself, I've invested in 50 startups, right? Um, pretty much every one of them has had some form of clinical experience, right? Of some
Okay,
sort.
so let's move into that lane then. Now, as the investor, what are you looking for? You probably see lots of pitch decks, right?
A few.
So, what? So, what are the what? When you open it up, you look at the first slide or two. Not just the presentation, but is it the problem? Is it the space? Is it the ROI? What's catching your attention today?
Doesn't vary between my investing and the time I spend as a fractional co-founder. So it's the people, right? I want to know who the team is. Do they have the experience? Um, do they, like, even just not having an ego and thinking they're going to be the one who takes it all the way to exit, or not being sure of an exit? Just people who are really authentic with themselves and understand what they know what they know, and know what they don't know, right? And be okay with sharing that, because they're asking for help. If you're asking for money, you're asking for help. End of the day, just like if you're asking for a fractional co-founder, you're asking for help. So knowing where your gaps and needs are is really important. End of the day, and then it goes back to the other stuff. Yeah, is it something that I'd like to see solved in the world? Does the technology have a chance of making it? I've been told often I'm the dream dasher, especially by docs who call.
Hey,
Um,
that's important though. It's an important role, right?
it is. Don't you want a fast no? Like, you really should.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
really not likely to happen. And here's a whole bunch of reasons why. Um, yeah, I've definitely been called up by quite a few people over the 2 decades I've been doing this. End of the day, people should just, from my perspective, you should just call it like you see it. Not that I'm right, but that's just my view of it. I'm sure they
Sure.
can go, just like lawyers. You can get 10 opinions from 10 lawyers. You get 10 different opinions from 10 different lawyers. So that's just one person's opinion about the need for it and the approach. And the other part is just the resilience, right? Like that mindset that it's not like you have the solution, you have an idea of a problem you like to solve, and how you get there. Not getting too hung up on the tech is really important. And I've seen it through multiple stages, where it was internet, then mobile, now it's AI. It really focus on the problem, right? Like, what are we trying to solve for? And you just bring the tech to bear that makes it happen. I'm tech agnostic, right? As long as it works well and it can scale. That's the other big thing I look for. Is the thing they're solving for scalable in the way in which they're trying to solve it?
All right. So how can you just get a feel for that? What's scalable today? Or how do you help to, uh, how do you look at it? How do you help a team determine if something is scalable?
Sometimes it's very easy because it's an idea that's too far ahead of its time, or there's just no reimbursement strategy for it, or it's incredibly niche. It can be only out of pocket because it's not going to be reimbursed in my lifetime for certain things. Can it scale in terms of the financial side? And then the other part is just the unit economic side. Is the if it's a direct to consumer play, for instance, does the unit economics allow for you to scale, or is the CAC too high to even get there? And if you have to raise the price so high, then like 5% of the population can afford it. This happened with recently with all the weight loss drugs. When they first came out, like very few people could afford it, and now there's this massive pressure to actually lower the prices to become more reasonable, so more people can afford it. In some cases, you can't do that. You can't bring the price. In this case, having worked in pharma, I'm sure they have healthy margins, very healthy margins in the former prices, and they'll still have good margins in the new prices and wherever they end
Sure.
up being. Having been through all that, in some cases, you just can't scale things cost effectively, right? So I do look
Is
to,
there something in the direct to consumer space that you might say, right? And just like as a category, you don't say a specific product, but the, what do you think could work in the direct to consumer space right now from
yeah, it's a
that's
great
that you're
question. I
seeing in
mean,
startups or that you think could be?
yeah, I think direct to consumer is a great space. The only challenge is it's not scalable, right? Because the vast majority of direct to consumer is just too expensive for most individual people. And I also am a firm believer that healthcare shouldn't be a consumer product. Ultimately, your health and well being is an asset of society at large. It's not just an asset for you as an individual. And so we have to be able to like deliver care for everybody. And yeah, you can make a ton of money selling direct to consumer stuff. And by the way, direct to consumer is also buyer beware model, which is half the stuff that's being sold to consumers we know doesn't really make a difference. And you see this all the time. Clinicians are saying, why are you doing that? That doesn't work. So to me, that's again, and inappropriate, right? Like companies that are selling stuff that doesn't work, just like I can sell you a soda. Okay, that doesn't make sense to me because if you're making claims that are not true, and that's maybe because I spent 12 years in pharma, and false claims actually mattered, right? Like you just shouldn't make stuff up. I mean, there's not much harm in saying, "Hey, this is the best burger in the world," but there is something wrong when saying, "Hey, take these vitamins and you'll like grow hair or live longer
Right,
or
right, right.
whatever."
Live
That's
longer.
just
Sure.
lying outright, right? And that's where the FTC should be all up in their grill and stopping this from happening. FDA should just stop it, but no one's policing it. They're treating healthcare like you would treat like selling bed sheets or something, and it's not the same.
Okay, so putting your Dream Dasher hat back on, what are the things that people should not build right now, right? I mean, it's saturated, or you've seen enough of it. Don't go down there, right? Because I'm sure there's still a lot of problems that are solved, but you've probably seen enough solutions that aren't actually solving them. So what's either oversaturated right now? Too many people are doing it. Too many big players are doing it. Just stay away from it.
I think anything that right now has too much capital invested in it, and that you've seen some of these companies are getting ridiculous amounts of cash at crazy valuations, there's going to have to be a roll up because there's not the space for that many of them. Whenever you
Yeah,
see like
I think
50 to
the
100,
AI, the ambient scribes, AI scribes is probably a good
that's just one
example of that.
example.
Right? There's so
RCM. I mean, there's
much.
a long list of things. Yeah, absolutely. The Scribe is just one of many examples where there's just too much AI. And frankly, I think this is a systemic problem, which is it's become too easy to build a company. Like it used to be hard to build a product, even if it was SaaS. Now you can build a product in a month and iterate and can evolve, and you're going to have like a
Sure.
thousand competitors. Distribution has become the new, more important variable. Like how do you drive scalable distribution, right? What's your go to market is much more important than product because product now is a commodity, right? Like everybody has the same tools.
Yeah.
You really can't compete on product anywhere near like you could compete on any like the go to market side, right? And the pricing and go to market becomes much more important. Before, you had to have a great product. Now, like you can make a great product, and by the way, somebody will come out and make a much better one in a month. or 2 months. And the other product can be disintermediated by almost anybody now. Like, look at Epic as an example. They
Right.
just destroyed the scribe market by saying, yeah, we're going to put a scribe in. Which health system is going to, take something other than Epic's scribe system? They won't. So
Sure.
they just whacked 60% of the market that those scribes were in. And so the
And those are
disintermediation,
reportedly billion-dollar valuations of those other scribe companies. It's
there's
crazy.
going to be a huge reckoning, right? There'll be pennies on the dollars for a bunch of those companies. The only thing they can do, not the only, one of the key things they'll have to do is they'll have to pivot into other areas where they may be able to cobble together enough stuff. But that continues the value prop to be worth not full integration. But as soon as you have like a fully integrated anything in Epic or any one of the major EMR systems, people just aren't going to waste their time with the non-integrated solutions anymore, right? And that's true in any segment, not just the provider side. Same thing with
The
payers, right?
HRs.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think disintermediation is much higher risk of that happening now than ever before you have an exit. And by the way, the fact that it's easier for a big company to build than to, go ahead and let a small guy build it, then buy it and integrate it later, that doesn't help the startup landscape very much either.
Yeah, I just want to restate that because I think that's a fascinating perspective that even with the ability to build a diverse set of solutions and products with technology today, most products can be easily commoditized, and it's the distribution channel that really matters and the go-to-market strategy that really matters. So you really have to prioritize that. Yeah, that's great.
Scalable go-to-market is way more important than product development. You don't get product is table stake and everybody can do it. And that's also a
Yeah,
challenge for the investor side, right? Because investors, they're looking at these things and they've got to make a bet and they're probably going to be wrong because there'll be something better in 3 months, 6 months.
right.
A drug, right? A drug, you would make a bet. You wait 5 years and nothing else is coming out with that drug. So either it works or it doesn't. If it does, you've got a decade or more to go make money on it.
Right,
Look at the LLM models. What's the half-life of an LLM model?
right.
Every month there's a new version coming out. Like then they're neck and neck all the time. Like they spend $1 billion to train the next version of the model, and a month later that $1 billion is worth zero because there's another model that's, it's like,
Yeah, like ChatGPT went from the clear market leader to having to call a code red because Gemini was out advancing them like just like that.
Yeah, the half-life of a product is dropped dramatically.
Wow.
The ease of creating it has increased dramatically. So investing has become much more difficult.
Sure. So how do you keep the patient in the room with all this? I mean, I respect that you're very focused on mindset and well-being and compassion and whatnot. So in order to do that, if we really want to develop products that matter, we have to keep the patient in the room and really keep them at the center of what we're doing. So I should say not so much you, but how do you help teams do that? How do you see that they do it? What works? What what's not working?
I mean, putting the patient at the center is easy. Patient at the center, right? End of the day, I think asking those questions, what is this person experiencing? And it really has to kind of be an N of one strategy whenever it comes to putting the patient at the center, creating like an archetype of what a patient is. And I would even back up from patient. It's a human being.
Sure. Okay. Mhm.
They don't have to be a patient in that moment.
Sure.
They're just living their life and dealing with their condition. I think that just the terminology we even use sometimes creates all kinds of interesting biases. How do you get people to be concerned about their health and well-being? That's the multi-trillion-dollar question ultimately, right? Because if we could,
Sure.
there's no one who's done it well. Behavior change is the number one product that everybody needs to build. Everybody has to have it. Every company I talk to, they build these cool, sexy technologies that help people do stuff, but nobody uses them, right? Like the drop-off rates are huge. Nobody even signs up. There's just this huge amount of inertia around human behavior change not being a core skill set. So you have to become a behavior change expert if you're doing anything around the patient directly. And even the providers too, right? Getting providers to adopt something is also a behavior change exercise. So human beings are fraught.
Absolutely. I
I
mean, as a
won't compare.
provider,
I won't compare.
once your patterns are set, you don't want to change. Once you got something that's
What?
working well for you, I think this is a huge issue for adopting technology in the healthcare setting. Is that if clinicians only hear it's 7 more clicks. and I'm doing fine just as I am. And so that's why there's a whole graveyard of wonderful technologies at the foot of, the physicians. That's for sure.
Two clicks too many.
So
2 clicks too
yeah,
many.
yes, exactly. But it matters, right? Because they'll tell you how many seconds it adds to your day, and it really does matter.
That's such an important point there. You talk to these people who see a clinical problem they're trying to address, and they may have brilliant technology on the clinical side, on the patient side, but they have no idea what it's going to take to scale. So I always think of when a company lands a deal, I always say, stop. Let's go learn how to scale that deal in that organization, because changing the patient's behavior is only one really hard problem. The next one is, how do you change that organization? And how do you go from, like, Dr. Strimel, like, adopting it to the entire organization? Like, how fast can you go from, I have an internal advocate. It got through all of the BS contracting. We got the financials figured out. We
Mhm.
customize it for you. Day one launch happens. Crickets. How do you get a patient into the system? How do you get a
Right.
provider? How do you get a provider to follow up? Like, it's all about behavior change, the consumer, provider, and organizational level. Because there's two pieces within a B2B to C, right? It's B2B and B2P to C. And you have to manage the change across all three stakeholder types simultaneously to be successful.
Sure. And as you said, incentives aren't aligned. Yeah, like that's the real work, right? And aligning all those incentives for sure. So, and actually, along those lines, we have all these great tools, but still all these problems. So we have a long way to go. If you could change like one mindset or one entrenched thought, what would it be? If you could get all these stakeholders in a room and said, listen, this is the first step we need to do to really solve some of these problems that I've seen people try over and over and over again to fix.
Yeah. I personally, I think that one of the key things we have to do is that anyone who does anything that touches human health and well-being needs to take a Hippocratic oath, whether they're an investor, a policy writer at the governmental level, any institution that touches care delivery, anyone who provides a service that supports care delivery, like a PBM, retailer, it doesn't matter. Investors, for sure, need to take a Hippocratic oath. Like, anyone who has any way of influencing health and well-being needs to take a Hippocratic oath. And if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be
Yeah,
in the industry.
you're in the wrong place.
You're in the wrong industry. Go, whatever, build a car or something. Don't, there's too many people who are not, and it's gunking up the system, trying to work around it all. And that
No, it's
includes
great.
investors, by the way. The investors are definitely part of the problem right there. They're the ones who are handing out money to companies who shouldn't exist, or
Sure.
doing things, or pushing them to do things that they shouldn't be doing because it's more profitable and profit. Like, I play around with my investor friends and say, hey, if you're an impact investor, I'm an impact investor. Like, how do I know if what I'm investing in is actually measuring impact, like health impact, right? Not financial ROI, but like the return on value from a human life being in a better place.
Yeah.
How many funds do you know that have those type of metrics in place versus ROI and capital return and portfolio? They don't talk about, like, hey, I say I prevented 10,000 heart attacks with my portfolio of companies, or I improved longevity, or reduced cancer, or whatever it is, right? That the fund is focused on. They don't put in clinical measures. So how do you know you're having an impact?
Yeah. I mean, they're just as focused on the exit too, right?
Financial, all financial metrics.
Well, lots of challenges still to go, right? So how are you finding the people that you want to work with in the next couple years? How do they find you? What's
Yeah.
what are you
Uh,
looking for?
it's a mosh pit of ways for that to happen. At this stage of my career, this many years in, it's usually inbound referrals from other
Mhm.
people. A lot of word of mouth at this stage of my career. I don't do any type of direct advertising. I do share thoughts on social media channels like LinkedIn, and people will see something. I'll do panels and talks and podcasts, and someone say, "Oh, wow, that guy sounds like someone I want to talk to about whatever." So it's mostly just keeping myself in the fray.
Great. Well, this has been a fantastic discussion. Wonderful to meet you, hear your story. A lot of great insights. I think keeping compassion. How do we scale compassion, right? And how do we make the business case for that? I think if we can align profitability with scaling compassion, I think that will be a huge step forward to making a lot of us a lot better off.
I think reasonable profitability. from an industry. This is not a normal good, right?
Yeah, sure.
Extorting someone's health and well-being, um, and taking advantage of. There's no pricing flexibility in this in healthcare, right? If you need to get a stent, you're going to get the stent, right? If you're on the operating table, you're not going to argue the bill.
Right.
before you get- so there, and healthcare knows that, right? So um, anyway, so yeah, it's something that you have to kind of keep in mind. The economics of healthcare, you can't treat it like normal. It's not a normal good. You can't treat it
Not a
like
widget.
no, it can't be supply and demand only, because supply is what it is, right? And demand is what it is.
Yeah, the
And
demand is
price,
insatiable,
yeah. I mean, think about
right?
it.
And then that's what we should want, because that's why we all got into this business. Well, Paulo, thank you very much again for joining us. For everyone else, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Healthcare Algorithm. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, as they always say, if you want to hear more of this content or help us build it, please hit the subscribe button. And we look forward to seeing you at our next episode. Take care.
Thank you, Brian.